I'm going to go ahead and start, since my part is really not important. We've got some really, actually nice presentations coming. A couple in particular that I think you'll find this really make the session worthwhile. About 2 years ago, I think it was at CNU, when it was in Oklahoma City, I co-founded with a small group, the CNU Latino, inspired by the Congressional Black Caucus. Before Brzezinski, who's been leading up the Congressional Black Caucus, introduced that subchapter in the CNU, you wouldn't see, there was one African man. That was the only black person you saw. There were some others, but there was very little, very few. And seeing their success in bringing folks in and introducing an agenda into the CNU that was a valuable agenda, I was inspired thinking, as I look around the room, I actually see a lot of Latinos. And we actually designated a space for the Latinos to sit. And a whole bunch of people that I didn't even know were Latinos sat there because they look like you, like they look like Latinos, or like me. I don't look like a Latino, but there I am. And so we discovered that there was a very big contingent of Latinos, and that in fact our father and founder is Latino, through and through. And I think you'll see that in a few minutes. So we decided we need a CNU Latino chapter. We didn't call it that. We weren't sure what it would be called. We had a lot of meetings. We didn't like the caucus idea at all. And we didn't like, we debated the names. We definitely discarded Latinx almost immediately. We didn't want anything to do with that. And finally decided on CNU Latino. And this is what happened the first year after Oklahoma City. We worked on what would we be called, what would we do, and we developed our logo. Our logo, if you've seen it, is the map of how far Latin America, or Spanish America, if you will, extended into the United States, which, if you really look at it, is like all the way up into Wyoming. It's pretty impressive how much land Mexico lost. We decided to use that as a map just to say, hey, we've been here a long time. Then we also had a lot of conversations about who we were. But what is Latino? What does that mean exactly? Because the reality is that we come from very diverse backgrounds. We're united by only two things. One of them is a language that comes from Latin. That's why we're Latinos, and that could be Portuguese, Spanish, and to some small extent, French. That's one thing that unites us. Mostly Spanish is a common language. The other thing that unites us is, in particular here in the United States, that all of us, whether we immigrated from Latin America into the United States, or whether, in the case of, say, Jonathan, the border crossed him, right? Longtime family, San Antonio, Mexican families, suddenly they're Tejanos, right? The border crossed them. Either way, the other thing that we share besides our language is being pioneers. Pioneers in this new land for all of us, including Jonathan. The thing about being pioneers is that we don't have the benefit of an old boy network. We don't have a 300-year history of parents and grandparents and all that provide an economic base or just simply an intellectual base of education or a good in socially or a great career path for us. So all of us really are self-made people. We've all had to start, often all over again, like my mom, who was a PhD in Argentina, came here, did her whole career all over again, and retired as a professor with her PhD again. So we've not only done our lives, but often done our lives twice in coming here. And that's what unites us. And the idea of CNU Latino was to create a little bit of a Latino old boy network, and old girl network too. And so that was the inspiration. Now, just recapping what we've done over the course of the last year, at the last CNU, we had 2 sessions, very successful sessions. In fact, our CNU Latino session, the one that's equivalent of this, had standing room only and was pouring outside. I don't know what we did differently. We had buttons. We made these buttons, and maybe that was the problem this time around. Actually, the problem this time around is that they only advertised it as a chapter meeting, so people thought this is just for them. But we had a very successful reunion, and we had a Picha Kucha reception session. We had beer that helped too. And we had Andres spoke, Jonathan Rojas spoke. He's a Chicano that talks a lot about the culture of the Mexican-American culture in Los Angeles. We had a gal, Marianne Chiapa, who is a Mexican architect who's making her career now here in the United States, and spoke about the difficulties and the challenges of being an architect in the United States, having already a practice in Latin America. And then we even had a fellow by the name of Brandon Plancher, who today you are Brandon Plancher, because he is a fellow from the United States who went to work in Mexico as a developer. So he was telling a reverse story. And Matthew will tell a reverse story too today. So we're reproducing that. We also had a great session. It was so large that they had to move the room. and give us the largest room and actually expand it. This was a session that Andres and Korkut, a Turkish architect, did on adaptation. Now, if you're familiar with climate change, the global south is having the maximum and most immediate impact from climate change. And this was a session about adaptation. What can you do to adjust to some of the things that maybe are out of our control or inevitable? Even if we recycle every toothpick and go to work in our bicycles, we're going to be impacted with a lot of things. So how can we adapt to it? A very successful session. After that, during the course of the year, we had a number of events. We had a fantastic event in Houston. Houston is 45% Latino. The event, the happy hour that we had in Houston, was attended by people all the way from Miami that came out to just be with us and join the group and all. And so it was a very productive session. We had some other events. We had a number of events that were just simply, we profile people. If you're interested in being part of this group and you would like it, you send me your headshot and information all about you, particularly about your Latino grandmother or about your trip from wherever it was that you were born and the experiences you had, and I'll write a profile about you. And then we'll publish that profile in our magazine. And we'll put your picture up, etc., and something you can send home to your mother. The whole point, in a way, was to help young people, young developers, architects, planners in the Latino community make a name for themselves, get known. So we're trying to promote each of the people. So we had a number of events where we actually did promote folks from within the organization. And we also have collaborated a lot with the Congressional Black Caucus, and that's why Brzezinski Voice's picture is up there. We had him in a webinar, a very successful webinar. He's certainly been invited to a number of events, and vice versa. Today, Abraham spoke at the Congressional Black Caucus session and gave a long presentation. We have a tremendous black population in Latin America, in Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Brazil, certainly, Colombia, Panama, Venezuela, northern Ecuador, and believe it or not, southern Argentina has a sizable black population. We have a few members of the organization that are members of both the CNU Latino and the Congressional Black Caucus. We had an On the Park Bench event on guerrilla urbanism, which was also very successful. Afterwards, I wrote an article that was published here in the whatever the publication that CNU does online. And guerrilla is guerrilla. Guerrilla is a small war. That's a Spanish word. And the guerrilla is the small warriors. And whether that has a positive meaning for you or a negative one, depends on what side you are of the guerrilla. But in the United States, of course, it connotates activism. And in a very Anglo tradition of Henry David Thoreau, civil disobedience. So guerrilla urbanism is activism with civil disobedience, not just civil disobedience. So we had a great session on that, and that was inspired by my proposal for a session here at CNU. I said, let's do a guerrilla urbanism session. And they didn't choose it, but they said, we'd like to do an On the Park Bench webinar presentation. So we did. Then we had recently a meeting that several of the people that are here attended, some of which have not attended a meeting in a very long time, but somehow, thank God, showed up, and here they are today going to address all of you. And that was, we have periodic meetings just to see what we want to do next. These are the events we've done in this, and are doing in this particular Congress. We had a wonderful turnout today, an event with Abraham, Margaret Brown, former planning director of Houston, again, a city which is 45% Latino, and Andres, who played devil's advocate and interviewer. And you did, by the way, a beautiful job. I've heard many compliments on your interview. They would talk and talk, Abraham would talk and talk, and then Andres would listen and listen and say, because the thing that I got out of this, and then he would summarize it in a very powerful way, the lesson drawn from it. So it was really it was an amazing event. We have our open session tonight, 7 o'clock, half a block from here at Fountain Plaza, where all the food trucks were, salsa dancing, lessons. You don't need a partner. Guys, don't be afraid. The ratio is like 10-1. You know, we really like this, so go. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. Don't have to be inhibited because I'll be dancing, so you won't have any reason to be inhibited. Abraham is a professional dancer, so he can inhibit you. Saturday, we have a session on hyperlocal urbanism, and it's going to be a lot of it. It's going to be about street life. And I think you'll find it a lot of fun. There'll be some parts of it that'll be quite, I think, enlightening about street life. And I'll be talking about street life in Latin America, basically. Abraham will be talking about street life in Houston, where there is a lot of Latin American street life, and there'll be other presentations. And Andres, no, you're not a part of that, are you? You're not a part. He's not a part of it. We're sorry. Sorry to disappoint. Now, I've been doing this for 2 years, doing all the newsletters and the advertisements and the promotions and submitting the proposals for the CNU sessions. And I've always wanted it to be the younger people that did this. But there's a problem with young people, which is they don't like, so nobody takes leadership. You talk to a group of young people, okay, nobody does anything because nobody wants to stand out as the leader. So nobody takes leadership, and then nothing gets done. So I took leadership, not because I wanted to be the leader, but because I wanted to get done. But thank God, because Abraham Soria was not a young person in the United States. He grew up in Peru. He's willing to take leadership and has agreed to steward this thing forward, at least for the next year, certainly with my full support and involvement. So with that, I want to introduce Abraham Soria, who will tell you a little bit about what's coming up for next year.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Abraham Soria. As Fernando stated, I'm originally from Peru, moved to the States when I was 18, so I've been here 25 years. Still have an accent. I'm not going to go away, but I'm okay with that. And yeah, so I've lived most of my life here. So I'm just going to talk really quick about what's going to happen this year and what we hope you to participate. So one thing is that we would like to hear you. We would like you to share your experience, what you're doing for your community, and pass the information towards us. We have a newsletter and we would like to promote your work and what you do. Youth outreach and education. Our goal for the next year is to work with universities. We already contacted the Texas Southern University in Houston to start doing some outreach with the students, and we would like to do the same for other areas in the States. Promotion of local Latinos events. If you're doing something for your community, if you're doing something with a Latino community, or any community, as a matter of fact, that promotes the concept of new urbanism, please let us know. We would like to put in the newsletter. Maybe we can also participate. We, with Brzezinski for the local CNU, and we've been going to Tampa, we've been going to Oklahoma, and he's been coming to Houston too. So we would like to do the same for other parts of the states with CNU Latino members. And yeah, let us help you with community outreach, and let us help us also spread the word about CNU Latino. As Fernando stated, the Latino concept is very, depending where you're from. I came here, I've been 25 years, and I still don't understand what Latino means in the States. However, if you consider yourself Latino, by all means, join this movement. If you work with a Latino community, please do. If you speak, again, Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, you speak Latin, by all means, let us know. Yeah. So we're excited about this. I'm excited to be part of this. And again, reach out to us. There's a QR code that you can scan for newsletters. And you have our social media and contact information there as well. So thank you for the opportunity. And now I'll pass it to Brenda.
Thank you, Abraham and Fernando. My name is Brenda Diaz, and I'll be talking a little bit about myself and a project I've been working on in the past year. So this is in Bowling Green, Kentucky. It's about an hour north of Nashville. Who am I? I am an associate urban designer at MKSK. I'm currently in Greenville, South Carolina. I am engaged in CNU Latino, and I'm also on the Emerging New Urbanist Board. My background is in landscape architecture, so I have a little bit of a unique experience where I've worked with landscape architecture and urban planning, and I've enjoyed both equally. My background is from Mexico. My parents are from Nayarit, and I was born in Southern California, and I've moved around in a few areas in Southeast, but I feel like this is, one of the proudest moments for my parents, having me up here speaking about my background and how important it is for us to speak about what we're doing. As a Latina, I don't see a lot of women, but the women that are here are very powerful, and I'm really happy that you're here. And so it's important to share about what we're working on, that we are part of this industry as well. So a little bit about the project. The project was instigated by the city of Bowling Green. This underutilized space, it's about 71 acres, is 6-minute walk from their historic downtown. So they wanted to activate this. It's right along the river. So they wanted to coordinate and hire a consultant group that would do that. So my firm, MKSK, we're landscape architects and urban planners. So this was perfect for us. I was actually 6 months pregnant during the interview, so I was really nervous about that, but it went well and we got the project, and we are currently now in task 2, where we're doing the phase 1 schematic design, and we hope to go all the way through CA. This project was really important to the beginning. This is where we went out there and got their input. This was where they could tell us exactly what they wanted to do, how they wanted to play, how they wanted to interact with the river, how they wanted to engage with the river, because this is such a critical part of their community, but there was nowhere for them to really access it. So we went out there, had a few engagement opportunities, and also introduced 2 different concepts and received feedback on what programming they wanted to see out there. The first concept was really trying to connect everything within the site. It's a huge site. How do you integrate all this programming and features that people want to see? How do you make that actually work? So we had making sure that you could actually get to the water, having kayak launch, boat launch, event spaces for the community to come together to have festivals, events, and really capitalize on the nature quality of this. So having a tree canopy walk. And then the second concept was really focusing on the natural features that were there, like the mussels that are from the river, and how do you play with that. And so we introduced some landforms and making it kind of something that could be unique and exciting for people to come and enjoy. The final project, or the master plan, is, like most of you all know, it's a combination of both concepts, really. So we combined the programming from both and made sure that we kept a lot of the really critical things, like having a place for them to go out and enjoy the water. So one of the introductions is having whitewater park right on the water. And the city is currently working on trying to get funding for that. There's also a tree canopy walk, and they have a lot of avid mountain bikers there, and they have a trail that the community itself actually maintains. So we improved that and made sure that it was something that they could enjoy all year round. Of course, the huge lawn space for festivals, events, and Music City's just down the road, so making sure that they can capitalize on that as well, along with having overlooks and being able to enjoy the river. Some of those features include, like I mentioned, having these landforms where you could see the events better, and then also including some water features that could play along with that desire to play with the water and really interact with it. I think a couple of, but yeah, so that was one of the important things about our presentation, or like our concept, was really presenting the community with ideas and features that they take ownership of and they will enjoy all year round. So the city can really capitalize on that. And we were really happy with the community engagement. I think that's one of our favorite things to do in this firm. And for me personally, I love going out to the community and hearing their feedback. So this was a really fun project. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew Marshall with an organization called New Story, coming from Atlanta, actually on the Atlanta CNU chapter board, and really excited to be here. Thank you, Fernando, for the opportunity to speak and share more about our work in Latin America. I want to tell you about our model in general, but first I want to start with some context and some background of who we are and where we've come from. So we are an organization that's turned 9 years old today. And over the course of those 9 years, we've been able to raise about $80 million in philanthropy to serve about 5,000 families with safe housing. And we've primarily done that through local NGO partnerships, and have been very blessed to find wonderful families that are just absolutely a delight to work with. And so what I'll explain is our historic model briefly, and then our evolved model. I don't have a ton of time to get into it. I wish I would. If you want to go deeper, we have an Apple TV documentary that you can check out. It's called Home. It's episode 8, I believe. And that kind of gives you a much deeper kind of background. Briefly, we imagine a world where everyone can secure their own housing. Duh, that's an obvious statement, but we believe that it's possible. And we do that by pioneering solutions to end the global housing crisis, by empowering families to become land and home owners in thriving communities. The key word there is empowering. Historically, we would have a model that was similar to social housing, so heavily subsidized. Going forward, and I'll explain this in detail, we're no longer subsidizing our projects, and I'll explain how shortly. As you all know, the housing crisis globally is insane. It's 1.8 billion currently who live without adequate shelter, and that is going to grow by 2030 to be close to 3 billion. And when you start to look at numbers like this, you get quite overwhelmed. And just to bring it closer to the Latin context, in Mexico, 3 in 4 Mexicans do not have access to formal housing finance. 4 in 10 Mexicans experience some level of deprivation of housing, and only 13% of the entire residential construction activity serves low-income populations. So you can see a massive gap in the need and also the supply. And so as we started to grow the organization, we realized that we had to do something different. Traditional philanthropy models were not going to solve the problem. And when you look at the actual numbers of funding out there for philanthropy from government and from the private sector, it's just not even possible to scratch the surface with philanthropy. The philanthropy number that is given each year is around $500 billion, and it has stagnated there over the last many years. Sometimes it'll go up a couple percentage points, but materially it doesn't really change. And so when you think about designing a solution, we had to think about it from a market-driven standpoint, not from a philanthropic-driven standpoint. And so for us, it's really thinking about how can we tap into the intersection of both. Just to get into a little bit of, I briefly talked about this, but get into the market supply. In Mexico, there's 2.2 million families who want to buy land. This is per Infonavit, the fourth largest mortgage provider in the world. But only 3,200 land loans were actually issued in 2013 by Infonavit for families. So there's a massive, like I said, gap between supply and demand. In our historic model, we could provide housing per person for around $3,500 USD. That, in many cases, is that's not too bad. $3,500 to help someone access life-changing housing for the first time. But you start to do the math across the billions of families who don't have access to housing, the math simply doesn't work. And I'll get into the specifics, but now with our new model, we're looking at closer to $125 per person in philanthropy, which is a great jump, and we're very excited about the next decade. When families don't have access to the marketplace, what do? They live in overcrowded situations, they may squat on land, they may immigrate, they get very creative in solving the problem, and rightfully this is obviously a massive blocker to prosperity. And so without access to land, families are locked out of the housing ecosystem and can't continue in that process of building and expanding over time. So that's where we're stepping in and providing what we call the Land Ownership Fund. But basically, we're providing financing to local developers to actually develop land for low-income families in a market-driven way. So our team raises impact investment here in the United States, as well as some philanthropy to cover our overhead and travel costs and all that. And we deploy that through trusted partners in order to open up and acquire land and then develop that land for families. Before I get too deep into the model, why isn't anyone doing this? What's actually blocking them from accessing financing and from developers developing land? There's many reasons, but some of the core reasons are a lack of financing, which I've already mentioned, and also a lack of maybe you say risk tolerance from developers, or a lack of historic precedent for developers to actually develop land. And so for us, we're looking at de-risking these in multiple ways. One primary way is through a savings model where families are they're not paying up front for the land, they're paying monthly for 12 to 24 months. And that helps families actually access the land for the first time. Some families choose to pay that all up front because they have savings, or maybe they have remittances from the United States that helps them out. But it's not a lump sum upfront payment. It really meets them at the monthly amount that they can afford. There's also a risk of families not paying, right? What happens if you get 8 months in and families stop paying? What happens then? And that's the case sometimes with a family who's living on low income. They may actually have a shock to the system, whether that's a medical bill or a family emergency. And so we have a wait list of families who've raised their hand, but basically we've oversubscribed in the project. And we try to get a waitlist system around 15%. And that allows us to slot in a family from that waitlist system. When a family says, hey, I need to exit the savings program, that family gets all of their savings back, and the family that was on the waitlist system has been paying in parallel. So that money just slots straight into the main group. And then on the reason for why developers are not actually doing this, we believe that one of the biggest blockers is bridge financing for developers, but more proof that it actually works, demonstration that it actually can work, financially speaking. And so that's really what we're focused on, is demonstrating by taking a first risk, by being willing to put our money up front and our investors' money up front to go out ahead and show what's possible. Just to really briefly show you how it works, land acquisition is obvious. Then we get into the participation selection and waitlist system, which I just described in a little detail. Families start saving and have that savings program for 12 to 24 months, like I mentioned. And that's where what we call technical assistance. It's a fancy word for basically just helping families along the way with financial literacy, helping them think about what's your dream home look like, what are some blueprint options for you. They talk to this architect so you can understand what it's going to take for you to go from land to your first casita, or whatever you want to start with. And then we actually install the infrastructure. It's not just land, it's not just raw dirt, but it includes all your municipal utilities, so sewage, water, electricity, and roads. And obviously that's critical for families to be able to do vertical construction and something they may not be able to access on their own. Upon final payment, families are able to access their title, and some families will take that title and use it as collateral to access financing, formal financing from credit unions, maybe in Fonavit if they're a formal worker, so that they can actually build vertical and enter into that phase. So that's obviously oversimplified, but kind of a high level view there. What's the current status quo for families? Unfortunately, it's many years. We've done a lot of research and shown that it's up to 15 years for a family to actually formalize their land. That includes going through the right government bureaucracy steps, figuring out who you need to pay, when you need to pay. That also talks about utilities installation, going to the right utility company and advocating for yourself there. You can imagine it's quite a complex process for families to do this on their own. And so we're really excited to speed up the process significantly for families. And obviously we're starting in Mexico, but believe that where there is strong rule of law and where there is strong property rights, that this model has legs to walk on. Just to give you a case study, this is in Western Mexico, in Jalisco, Mexico. This is in the municipality of Etzetlan. It's probably about 20,000 people, more or less. And you can see the urban core and the city center right here. So this project is 941 lots right outside of that. It started as just 300 lots, but the demand was so large that more land was acquired by our local development partner to increase the size and meet the demand. We can talk about this in a lot of detail, but I want to point out some cool elements. Obviously, the soccer field in the park is really a great new benefit for the families. But the school, that's going to be a really great addition to this neighborhood. That's not something we are paying for. That's something that a local college is doing. But you can start to see this as a platform to bring in local partners and do more than just provide housing, but truly think about neighborhood and town development. In this given project, there was a wait list of 54% of the total pie. So there's just so much demand for families to access this kind of product. All the families we work with have never owned land or a formal home before. A lot of them live with other family where they may rent. And so you can see this as establishing a generational asset for these families and something that they can use as collateral for the next step. We can talk a lot about the master plan. We're really excited about continuing to improve this. I'm sure a lot of you all who are much more experienced in master planning and urban development see problems here. And I'd love to talk to anyone who thinks they have a unique insight on how we could improve. And this is obviously just one example. But over the next 5 years, we'll develop close to 40 projects, so 20,000 lots. And so we have a lot of opportunity to bring the best urban design to families in Mexico. Down the street, 15 minutes down the street in a different municipality, they heard about the project and they said, hey, we're interested, come work with our families. And so in Aguiluco, there's 401 lots under development currently. We just entered into the infrastructure installation phase. So you can see this spreads by word of mouth. Municipalities do not have to put in any of their own money. They obviously have to put in time around permitting and things like that, but it doesn't require them to put any money in. There's no subsidy into the project. Obviously, we're covering our overhead and things like that with philanthropy. The actual project financing is done at market rate, at local market rates. Real quick on the architecture, most in this room probably understand that in LATAM, in places like Mexico, families are progressively improving their home over time. They're not building a 3-bedroom master home. They may start with something smaller and build up over time. So we're trying to help provide blueprints and options for families to improve their home over time. These brick elements can be removed and new rooms can be added. This particular housing model could go vertical one more floor. And here's an example of a family who's actually done that and improved their home over time. And this obviously doesn't happen overnight. This is many years. I want to briefly talk about Mara. She just built her first home. Her husband and her 2 children now have a safe place to live. And she said, it's very fulfilling to have something we own where my daughters can grow without the fear of having to move out unexpectedly. So I've talked a lot about the wealth creation, but you can imagine the psychological safety that now having ownership truly means for a family. We're targeting to serve about 60% women-led households in Mexico, which we're really excited about. And the other thing I didn't really get into is that not only could you access home financing, but when you have an asset this large, you could also access small business loans or other types of emergency loans that you might need for your family. And just to reiterate the demographic we're serving, it's approximately within this lowest 50% of the population. In Mexico, about 50% of the population is informally employed, meaning they're not a W-2 equivalent that we would think of here in the US. And so they don't have access to formal financing products like we do. And these are a couple other criteria in terms of not owning land, being in at least one indicator of poverty. So really trying to serve not the entire segment, but probably on average around the 40th percentile of the population. With $25 million of impact investment, we can unlock life-changing land for 20,000 families. It's about 80,000 people, more or less. And the housing finance potential is, we're estimating close to 400 million, maybe a little bit less than that, more than that. It's hard to tell right now. But what's even bigger is the demonstration in the market that we're really excited about. Once you actually show what can be done at market rate, where families can actually afford the product, the sky becomes the limit, because now the risk is taken off the table. Obviously, it's still risky, but once you have a first mover, it becomes more attractive. We're excited to expand across Latin America as well. These are some countries that we may work in the future, but right now we're exclusively focused in Mexico. Historically, we worked in Haiti, Bolivia, and El Salvador. But as you can imagine, as you expand your geography, the complexity and the difficulty grows. So I'll leave it there. Thanks everyone for letting me speak. And if you know of anyone who's interested in impact investing or philanthropy for affordable housing, or if you looked at our master plan and you're like, hey, you got 18 problems, here are the problems you have, I'd love to hear from you.
How about
Thank you.
expanding to Texas?
We'd love to work in the United States. We've not figured out the cost. But yeah, we'd love to.
Can we ask, how about the whole question? Do we have to, how long do we have? Because there's so many interesting comments and questions we would have, but I have no idea how long our session is.
It's the last session.
Okay,
So
so
you
we can
really,
stay here.
well, official ending time, what, 5 o'clock?
Oh, 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine? Okay, 5.
Okay.
And,
But we can go long.
but we can go as long as you like. Okay. I'll be leaving at 7 though, so I'm going to the street.
What was the question?
How big are the lots?
Sorry?
How big is the average lot?
Average lot is 90 square meters, so approximately 1,000 square feet.
How many have you built?
Dimensional.
The question is, how many have we built? And then I'll get to your question. Like I said, our historic model was close to 5,000. In this model, 941 plus that next project. So still in the early stages.
So you're laying out those lots and blocks. What are the width and depth dimensions of the lot?
I think in that case study I shared was 25 by 40, something like that, if I remember correctly.
And the developers are making money.
Yeah, the developer makes a developer fee, and we're lending at the average the average bridge financing rate in Mexico right now is somewhere of 16 to 20%. So we're in that range. We don't want to manipulate the market. We don't want to distort the market, because ultimately we would like for a local financer, to take our place. We're filling that gap because there's nothing.
You realize that if it's subsidized and nobody's making money, it's not
Exactly.
scalable.
Exactly.
Whose idea was this? And is it a foundation that has an interest in Latin America? Are they just saints? This is a very odd thing, because
Yeah.
to help people in another country,
Yeah.
when our country has all the problems in the world.
Yeah.
What's behind it?
So myself and 2 other co-founders started the organization about 9 years ago,
Oh.
after personal experiences in Latin America, seeing families who were living without safe shelter and having our hearts changed. And so directly seeing that need, we decided to start the organization. We started in Haiti. So we started serving families from the 2010 earthquake. And in that case, we were raising $6,000 for each home. But we believe that innovation should go to the families who need it most first, and trying to serve, one day at a time.
Even in the 2-year, even in the 15-year range, those folks haven't paid for home,
Yeah.
which is essentially what we do with debt. And usually at the end of the 15 years, it's been refinanced 3 times, and you've got another 40 years to pay it off. They're, in a sense, better off.
Yeah, in that 2-year period, that's just to access the land. That's not the full home, right?
Yeah, that's just the land.
They need to do vertical construction.
But then
for
they
that.
have the equity for the land,
Yeah,
for
exactly.
the full home loan.
Exactly.
I have a couple of sociological questions. By the way, the new urbanists are very committed to studying failure. because our profession is a profession that has failed generation after generation, and we were born of the critique of suburbia. No one else was doing it at the time. And one of the things about the kind of housing that you're doing, I have two specific questions.
Yeah.
One is, where are the cars that are never in your photographs? That's one.
Yeah.
It's not crucial, it's just I want to know
Yeah.
how you handle that. The other thing is self-building. You know how they complete the building?
Yeah.
Which you seem to control beautifully. They haven't made a mess of it, which is the usual thing.
Yeah.
And then the third, there's a little part which is really stunning. Where, like, where's the laundry? Which has actually destroyed an awful lot of third world housing. There's no place the laundry gets stolen every day.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the fundamental one, the really big one, is the ownership. Can they sell the units?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is to prevent a person to come in, list the unit? What do you think the units are worth? What
That
does somebody else pay for?
That case study, the families purchased them at $7,500 US. They got appraised for about 2 times that.
Okay,
about-
15,000. Okay, these are families that have an asset of 15,000, but they've never really held 15,000 in their hand. 15,000. I have 15,000. What prevents a from coming in, buying all of them for 15,000, and saying, "I'll rent it back to you." You end up with 15,000. You're still making the same payment. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then the whole thing ends up being an enormous slumlord operation that you built.
Mm-hmm.
This has happened. That's why I asked it.
Mm.
How do you prevent that from happening?
We've been actively thinking about, in the agreements with families, having a right of first refusal, and that being basically our way to prevent that. But we haven't figured out the
What does that
exact.
mean, right? If you would buy
Meaning
it,
we would have the first right. Like we
you can't put a deed restriction?
we've been talking about that too. Yeah,
Has it
'cause
happened at all?
not right now, no.
Yeah.
But this
Even though you built 6,000.
early stage. No, in those cases, the first projects we did, the nonprofits that we work with are very much like in the community every day, working with the families. So they're advocating to the families, hey, keep this asset. It's worth much more.
I think we should put you up for a Nobel Prize.
You had a question about the cars.
Yeah.
Not every family, I wish I could put this up, not every family parks their car in the kind of slot that they create on their property, but there is a street park. We account for street parking. We're probably 1 car per
On the
that.
street, unprotected. They don't have time to.
Some families choose, I'll show you another one real quick. Some families choose to put in a fence. It's up to their preference.
That's the typical Latin American way. It's a driveway with a iron gate in front
It
of it.
doesn't look that good.
Yeah, I probably chose one of the best ones, but yeah, there's some of them that definitely don't look as nice.
Hey, but when you're doing affordable housing and you're doing this stuff, you can't be like exquisite. Exactly.
It's a first step. It's a first step, and the idea is that families can improve on it over time.
And it's their aesthetic, not yours.
We're trying not to impose any kind of
And you've raised the funds from the United States to do this.
yeah.
And
Mostly from benefactors or from people that are actually investing and expect a return.
We raise philanthropy to cover our staff's cost, and that's primarily through high net worth individuals who believe in our mission and what we're doing. And then the impact investment that we raise is from similar individuals, some institutions. They're getting a return around 10% minus, because we minus hedging, minus risk adjusted losses and things like that.
10% is pretty good.
And that's over 5 years.
I'd love to keep talking about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
But this is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank
Matt, I
you.
got that one quick question. So I'm actually in Atlanta, so I know about you.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, my background is technology, so it's what Y Combinator. Two things. One, this relates to the new model, which I think definitely makes sense. It being where Latin America really all started.
Yeah.
How does that potentially transfer to other Latin American countries / other Caribbean countries? Have you all looked at explored it? And then the second thing is going to the question of the deed restriction. Have you all looked at enabling the community to basically create a trust where collectively they own the land and have some sort of governance around it?
Yeah.
Individually, they own the houses on top, and then you create that collective governance ownership, and also deter one owner from being able to sell to a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, that's actually what we've done in some of our projects in El Salvador, which is not collective ownership because each family owns their lot, but a community-run governance board, basically, kind of thing to approve any major issues or, hey, the playground's going in, what do we think? To the question of applicability to other countries in the Caribbean and Latin America, like I mentioned, rule of law is critical, property rights, having a property rights system that's robust. In Mexico, housing is in the national constitution. thankfully. And those are some of the critical components. The other one is having a developer ecosystem. Are the developers willing to take a risk with us? We're thinking and possibly going to try developing it on our own when there's not a developer that's willing to take that risk, just to demonstrate it. But those are a couple of things that we think are necessary in order for something like this to happen. The amazing thing is that we're able to leverage the payments that families are making. Out of 100% of the total project costs, about 50% of that comes from our financing and 50% comes from families' cash payments monthly, trying to leverage our cash.
Do you lecture in Mexico about this?
We have half our team is in Mexico, and
We invited them.
yeah, we want to come and speak. And
Yeah.
we're trying to share the.
We're there's, I forgot to mention, it's not really CNU Latino, but I'll pretend it is, just to aggrandize our new organization. We're having a CNU in Mexico City at the end of this month. Not Mexico City, in Leon, Mexico. And Andres is the main speaker.
We have somebody that's actually going to have it's a woman who's been studying security, and she's Brazilian, well, she's born an expert. She came to the United States, read all the literature, spoke to all different kinds of policemen and everybody, read all the literature, and then went back to Brazil, which is extremely problematic, that kind of thing, and then wrote that up with all the policemen, and now she has a huge report, and it's worthy of a PhD, that she's going to make for the first time, this report. And security is, I've worked in Haiti and so forth, and you can't lock things up with just seal the lock, it's that kind of place. And I'm very concerned because these are so open and so neat, and the cars outside, and so many things that I tell people they can't do, and I'd love to not have to tell them they can't do.
Yeah.
But don't worry, your car's going to be outside. You're going to be okay parked out there.
Yeah.
And I'd just love to learn more about the holy water you're using to make everybody safe.
Yeah, we'd love to talk about it.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.